All right, let's stand together. We've been standing every week to read the word of the Lord. We're actually going to start in the last few verses of Mark 4. So we're going to be starting Mark 4:35, and we're going to go through Mark chapter 5. If you are new or visiting this Sunday, welcome to our summer series through the book of Mark. We are obviously in week 5, and we encourage you, if you're looking for a place to dive in and have community, to journey with us through the book of Mark this summer. Here we are, verse 35, chapter 4. It'll be on the screens as well, starting with, "On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, 'Let us go across to the other side.' And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. And other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?' And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea," let's just say it together, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Mark 5, they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. Here we go. We got 1 week off in Mark 4. Mark 5, we're right back at demonized people and unclean spirit. Welcome to the Gospel of Mark, all right? Right out of the boat. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains. But he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he, Jesus, was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country, and people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And when they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. I don't know why, I just think that's hilarious. They're like, "Will you please leave?" There's a lot of begging happening in this chapter, including them begging Jesus to leave. They're terrified. As he was getting in the boat, he honored them. Isn't that so nice of Jesus? Okay. As he was getting in the boat, the man who had been possessed with the demons begged him that he might come with them. He did not permit him. He said to him, this is beautiful, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, how he has had mercy on you." He went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone marveled. Hey, what if sharing our faith was just that easy? Just went and told people how much Jesus had done for us. We just told people how much mercy we've received. That's a freebie right there. Okay, verse 21. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, back on the other side of the sea, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come, lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." And Jesus went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years and who had suffered much under many physicians and had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" His disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house someone who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. And they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside, took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and he went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cumi," in which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. He strictly charged them that no one should know about this, told them to give her something to eat. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You can take a seat. Whew, I know it's a little warm in here. We're gonna be okay for a few minutes, right? Thank you for the fans. That's definitely helping. I can feel the air moving up through here. Guys, this evening we get to see what happens when Jesus encounters, I don't particularly love the use of air quotes, but it's just right now is one of those moments. But we're going to get to see what happens when Jesus encounters impossible situations. Tonight, this story is Mark 5 is intentionally giving us a pivot point in this narrative where we get to see what happens when Jesus and his kingdom breaks in to impossible situations. And tonight we're going to filter this teaching through two statements. The first statement is that no one had the strength to subdue him. And the second statement is, and no one had the power to heal her. We get to see this wild man's affliction and that no one had the strength to subdue him. And then we get to look at these two women and their woundedness, and that there was no power to heal until the kingdom of God broke in. I've always loved how Mark took the calming of the storm and paired it with this demonized man. I love that those two stories are nestled together. And I believe it is completely on purpose because we get to see in the calming of the storm, Jesus exercise his authority and his dominion over the natural realm. He looks at this windstorm and says, peace, be still. And it obeys him. And then the scene changes and we get to see Jesus exercise his authority not over the natural realm, but over the supernatural, the spiritual realm. We see a storm that was freaking out these lifelong fishermen, and he subdues it. And we see this demon-possessed guy in a far-off country that no one could help, and he subdues his affliction. If you've ever been tormented or have felt afflicted by demons, you know that it feels very much like a storm raging around you or a storm raging within you. Anybody identify with that experience? I feel like, wow, I'll be very honest with you. I had a moment just this past, I don't even know what day it is now. It was either Friday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday, one of the last 3 or 4 days where something happened. There was some conflict in our family and I had went out, it was late at night just to walk around the backyard. It wasn't me and my wife. We're good. Arlena, I love you, babe. And I felt the storm. I felt just this swirl of like confusion and accusation. And if you've ever just been under any torment or affliction, you know it can feel very much like a storm. And so if you miss Mark chapter 1, we gave an introduction to unclean spirits in Mark chapter 1. We titled it Demonology 101. So we're not going to revisit that tonight, but I would encourage you, go listen to that message and lean in. We're kind of unashamedly as a community saying, look, we're 5 chapters into Mark. And chapter 1, chapter 3, and chapter 5, it's like kind of the main storylines happening. 3 out of the first 5 chapters we've got unclean spirits running amok, and Jesus has shown up as the deliverance king, and he is commanding an authority and putting them in their place. And so the notes for the teaching, you saw the follow along, but all this stuff's on our blog, and I encourage you to dive deeper into this content. But the story here in Mark 5, I don't know if it did this for you, but it immediately reminded me of Mark 3. You remember the strong man in Mark 3? And Jesus said this in verse 22, we have it on the screen. The scribes came down from Jerusalem, and they were saying of Jesus, he's possessed by Beelzebub, and by the prince of demons he casts out demons. And he called to them and he said to them in parables, how can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom's divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but is coming to an end. But no one, some say no one with me. This is so important. No one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods unless he first binds the strong man. Then he can plunder his house. Did you see in this story in Mark 5, no one could bind him anymore. No one had the strength to subdue him. So far in Mark's gospel, the deliverance king has commanded unclean spirits, rebuked demonic forces of nature, and erased sickness and disease. And we got to pay attention to how he's doing it. How's he doing it, guys? He's literally just speaking. Remember in Mark chapter 1, when I said Mark wrote chapter 1 to make us think of Genesis 1? Remember Genesis 1 was the creation of the world, and Mark, he is inviting us to see Jesus' arrival as a recreation of the world, right? And so with that in mind, can you now draw another parallel? How did the author and the creator, how did he create in Genesis 1? He speaks, let there be light. He's creating, and now we see God himself, the author, has now stepped onto the planet he created by the words of his mouth. He's now walking on the planet in this recreation and renewal story, and he's putting things back into order with what? His voice. Whether it's unclean spirits, demonic storms, sickness, disease, it is listening and it is obeying his command. The word rebuke, in these stories, we see him rebuke the unclean spirits in Mark 1. We see him rebuke this windstorm in Mark 4. It means to enforce a merited penalty. It'd be like if you skipped out on your taxes and got a penalty because you actually broke the law and did something wrong, and the IRS has been given an authority to collect taxes, and they exact a penalty on you. That is what the idea of this word rebuke is. It is to express severe disapproval. It's an office of authority that is bringing correction. This isn't like your buddy saying, you were mean to me, you hurt my feelings. It's not like one of your friends correcting you because you spoke out of turn or you mispronounced a word. This isn't equals. The word rebuke is somebody in authority is bringing a correction, right? Even the wind and the sea obey. They listen. They submit to. This is a major theme through the first 5 chapters of Mark. It is authority. Authority, authority. Look at your neighbor and say authority. We see Jesus. Hey, it's 5:12, it's hot in here. You know, I'm not gonna make it to the end of this message on my own, all right? So look at your other neighbor and say, authority. We gotta get this. You might think this is cheesy. I see you rolling your eyes. I don't really care, okay? Because we have to get a revelation of authority if we're gonna walk as Christians in Salt Lake City in the month of June. You want to try to go at your own without authority, without tapping into heaven's authority, that's fine. But I think you're probably going to get your lunch eaten, you know? I've experienced that myself. I am asking God to put more authority on us, on me, on our elders, on our church, because we're living in a day that our cute ideas and our neat Sunday services, they're not going to meet the need of the hour, friends. We need a gospel that has power. We need a gospel that can move things. We need a gospel of authority. The word authority is rooted in authorship. So the one that authored the cosmos with his voice has come down and is now walking on it and is reordering it, because the first man, Adam, squandered his dominion. Man was given authority, authorship over the planet. What was this whole naming of the animals thing? Why did God let Adam do it? Because it was Adam's domain. It was Adam's responsibility. So God said, you name the animals. You're co-authoring with me now. So Adam, though, squandered his authority and things got badly out of order. Mark 5 is showing us that the second Adam is here to put things back in their place. Someone say, under the dominion of a man. Not of the spirits. God created man and woman in the garden, and he gave them the mandate. You be fruitful, you multiply, you rule over the earth, you rule over the earth, you rule over the earth, you subdue the earth. Do you see who's supposed to be in charge? Man. Got out of order. Looks like all the unclean spirits are in charge in most of these stories we're encountering so far. And so the second Adam, the son of man, is putting them back under the dominion of man. We have to get a revelation of authority. So he comes to this demonized guy. No one had the strength to subdue. The word subdue, are you hearing? Genesis 1, be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth. Oh, but nobody could subdue this man. No one could tame him, could restrain him. But the second Adam is here, and he's subduing the earth. He's subduing the unseen spiritual realm that is, here's the kicker, that is behind so much of our dysfunction and our brokenness. Aren't you thankful that someone is strong enough for your issues? Aren't you thankful that someone is powerful enough, thank you, to handle your dysfunction? Aren't you grateful that someone is forceful enough to command your demons? Come on, we gotta get a revelation here. You didn't save yourself. You didn't free yourself. You didn't heal yourself. You maybe were obedient at times. Okay, you maybe were faithful at times, but Jesus subdues these things. Aren't we grateful that somebody's strong enough for our issues, our dysfunction? I'll be really honest. I am so grateful that he is forceful enough to command demons. I am so grateful that in my Bible, in these stories, they obey him. Yeah, it's cool that the storm went calm. That's really cool, powerful. Actually, for much of ancient history, the sea represented untamable power. That was how the ancients viewed the ocean. It was the place of wild, untamable power. Nobody could tame the sea. Jesus speaks. He doesn't even call on any other higher name. He just uses his words. Why? Because he's the author, right? And then he encounters this man that no one could subdue. Isn't the word of God beautiful? These stories are stacking intentionally so that we would catch a revelation of somebody. Look at your neighbor and say, authority! Authority! Guys, I'm telling you right now, we're gonna rise and fall. We are gonna rise and fall on our understanding of Jesus' authority. We will thrive or we will struggle and we will lose if we don't get this. His name is Jesus. He's the image of the invisible God. He's the Word who became flesh, dwelt among us. He's the bread of life. He's the resurrection and the life. He was anointed in the Holy Spirit to save, heal, deliver, and subdue all that is out of order in our lives. He's not here to play games. He's not here to play church. He's not here to advance your American dream or to validate your dysfunction. He's here to save you from your dysfunction and rebuke the spirits that torment you, because God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. No one else can do what this man does. New age healing can't do what this man does. Self-help gurus can't do what this man does. Religious works can't do what this man does. Licensed counselors can't do what this man does. Medical doctors can't do what this man does. I'm not taking shots here. I'm just saying, he's the author. No one can do what this man does. And he's forcefully rebuking strongholds, commanding strong spirits, the things that no one could bind. I hope you see where we're going tonight. What in your life do you have in that category right now? No one can bind. No one has had the strength to subdue this for me. Just like at the dawn of creation when he authored the cosmos, he's simply using his voice. Come out of that man, unclean spirit. Peace, be still. And my favorite one out of Matthew 8, of the same version of this story, go. Look at this, Matthew 8:16. That evening they brought to him many who were oppressed by demons. Someone say many. If you hear and you're oppressed by demons tonight, you think you're alone? Ha! Many. Many, including your pastor, okay? Including your pastor. I can't tell you how, oh man, I'm gonna get some emails on this. I can't tell you how many demons I had to fight with Jesus this week to get to this message. Think you're alone. Many who were oppressed by demons. He cast out the spirits with a word. Oh man, this is so good. And he healed all who were sick. Why? This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. He took our illnesses and he bore our diseases. Somebody in this church tell me, where did Jesus take our illnesses and bear our diseases? On the cross. Is the cross an event in our future, or is it an event that's already happened behind us in our past? Because has this already happened? So do you see why then we can actually stand and believe that Jesus has already paid for all of this stuff? So then it comes to the story. I remember I read that. He cast them out with a word. And then I kept reading in Matthew 8. And when he came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men, don't ask me why they got it. Look, Matthew and Mark, they should have synced their stories. I don't know. We're not going there. Okay? Coming out of the tombs, so fierce that no one could pass that way. Behold, they cried out, what have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us? This is Matthew's. Now a herd of many pigs was feeding at some distance from them. The demons begged him, saying, if you cast us out, send us into the herd of pigs. And he cast them out with a word, and he said to them, go. There's a revelation for us here when confronting spirits. Do not underestimate the power of your words. Y'all have heard me teach on this before, that there is life and death in the power of your tongue. Why? Maybe it's because you're made in the image of God. You're made in the image of an author who created the entire cosmos by just speaking. And then when he came down to live on this ball that he created, he walked around and then he commanded the spirits just by speaking. Authority. The scripture says, greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. So if you're a born again child of God, the one who commands the demons lives inside of you. Travis, you already know that. Maybe it's time we started talking back. Daimonizomai is the Greek word for demon possessed. Many scholars would actually say that demon oppressed is more accurate, but demon possessed is our English word. We got this Greek word, we're trying to figure out what to do with it. But the point is that the unclean spirits had such a strong hold in on this man, and they needed to come out. Did you notice how Jesus said that? So that presumes that they were in. Okay? So demon possessed, demon oppressed. The guy had a problem, and no one could help him until Jesus showed up. So what's in the name? Because in Matthew's account, Jesus just said, go. And they went. Which is why I love Mark's account, because we get a little bit more detail. In Mark's account, he says, come out of unclean spirit, and it appears that maybe nothing happened. And then he asks, what is your name? So what's in a name? There's 2 things in a name. There's 2 things, identity and there's authority. So when he asked this man his name, it was calling back to this man's true identity, which we see the demons had robbed him of. This is what unclean spirits do. They will wrap up a hold of you so tight that you forget your own name, your own identity, right? They had robbed this man. They had tormented him day and night. They had made him an outcast of society. The question disclosed the level of torment that the demons had inflicted on this man. His response, legion, was a Roman military term, about 4,000 to 6,000 soldiers. The word itself depicts the strength of a highly organized readiness to destroy or kill on command. This guy had a major problem, a legion of demons. It's no surprise that no one had the strength to subdue him. His identity had been robbed, not just his sanity. But names also are critical to authority. You remember about Adam and dominion? And God said, I'm gonna have you name the animals. In the book of Genesis, God gave Adam dominion over all creatures by granting Adam the right to name them. We're gonna have a little bit of fun with this for a second. But knowing the name of a creature gives you the ability to direct it or command it if you have established dominion with that creature. The point is, you can't control or command something if you don't know its name. So I see some random dog tearing through the sanctuary here, okay? And I'm like, hey, and I don't know whose dog this is. I'm just like, hey, dog, okay? And this thing's just gonna keep running around the sanctuary, okay? But it was Blake's dog, Teddy, that got off the leash in the foyer, and Blake knows it by name, has established dominion with it, and Blake stands up and calls it by name, Teddy, sit. And he commands with authority and uses his dominion because he knows the creatures. What is your name? Naming has a power, and knowing the name of something is the beginning of commanding it. So when you're afflicted, when you're struggling, when you're confused, when you feel the swirl of some demonic thing because it's June in Salt Lake City and all of a sudden life just got way more complicated in your spiritual life, all of a sudden it just got really weird in the heavenly place. All of a sudden connecting with God just got really hard. I wonder why none of us could sleep on Friday night. How many of you had trouble going to sleep on Friday night? Look around this room. How many of you had trouble going to sleep on Friday night, May 31st, as we clicked into June 1st? We stayed up in bed. We couldn't sleep till 2:30 in the morning. Knowing and naming is the beginning of commanding. What I'm trying to help us see, friends, is that Jesus came as the second Adam, and he gathered a bunch of people around him and said, follow me. We've talked about this a few times. He didn't just come to do the deal and be the king and do it all. He actually just spent 3 years doing it, gathering a band of people around him, teaching them how to do it, right? And said, follow me, let's go, right? 3 years, and then he said, you guys get back to work. You guys, you gals, you men, you women, I had to come and reclaim dominion over this ball. And now that I have reclaimed dominion and authority, here you go, here you go, here you go. The point is, if we are followers of Jesus and friends of Jesus, the thought just occurred to me. How many of you guys know that there's probably no other church today in Salt Lake City preaching a sermon on naming demons so you can command them? I just want you to know, you're like, why am I sitting in this hot sanctuary at 5:29 on a beautiful day where I could be hiking? Let me tell you why. Because you're hungry to follow Jesus. You're hungry to have a relationship with God that goes beyond the niceties of Christianity and showing up at some service to sing your 3 songs of Kumbaya. You know there's a war to be waged, and you want to be somewhere where you can rub shoulders with a Judd Robertson and learn how to command spirits, or a Murray Watts and learn how to make demons flee, or any number of men in here that God is calling, a Blake Staley, to carry healing. That's why you're sweating right now. So then the story shifts from this wild man to this wounded woman. And I really felt, I've never seen this before, but I really feel like in all of the gender confusion and fluidity, and let's just blur the lines. So I just felt like the Lord said, no, men tend to be wild, unsubdued, unbroken, right? Like that's the main struggle of a man. It's men tend to be wild. They need to be subdued. But the story more often for women is that they're wounded and they've been crushed and they've been broken. And so we got this wild man that no one had the strength to subdue. And then it switches to this wounded, crushed woman that no one had the power to heal. And I just felt the Lord say, look, this is different. The way life wounds men and the way life crushes women, it's different. And look at this. No one could help him and no one could help her, but here's the second Adam, the Son of Man, the deliverance king. She'd suffered much under many physicians. Y'all know the story. She spent all she had. She was no better, but just got worse. Ever been in one of those hopeless situations? Chasing answers from industries that we created to save, heal, and deliver us. Just saying. Only getting worse. What we see here is a woman who abandons 12 years of searching for her own solution to take the longest and boldest walk through a crowd of her entire life. But there was an Old Testament prophecy that when the Messiah walked on the earth, there would be healing in his wings. The Hebrew word for wings is the same Hebrew word for the tassels of a garment. So the Jews had a prophecy that when Messiah came, there'd be healing in his wings or healing in the tassels of his garment. And so Jesus was a rabbi, so he would have been wearing one of these Jewish prayer tallits, is what they're called, that have these little tasseled fringes on the edge. And he's walking through the crowd, and this woman who has spent 12 years pursuing all these other solutions says, did you notice she had heard a report about Jesus? You know the Bible says faith comes from hearing? She had heard about Jesus, and it was enough to put faith in her heart. If he's the Messiah, and the word says there's healing in his wings, the tassels of his garment, then I actually can do this super low key and creep through this thing, and I just need to reach out my hand to the little tassel on his prayer shawl, and I don't have to make a big disturbance and scene, because my whole life is a big disturbance and scene, because I've been bleeding for 12 years. I've been outcast for 12 years, afflicted and unclean for 12 years, so I'm just gonna sneak through. What we're watching is faith in action. And she grabs the little fringe on the edge of his garment, and power goes out from him. And what's amazing here, talking about a name, is she went to get healing, and he turns and gives her a name. Daughter. Don't miss this. She went to get healing. She got healing and an identity. You think there weren't demons behind whatever sickness she had? I'm sure there were. She needed a new name. No sooner had Jesus finished calling her daughter, the guys from Jairus' house show up, and the literal statement is, your daughter is dead. You gotta love the Bible. It's amazing. Literally, Jesus has just healed this 12-year-old woman and said, daughter, your faith has made you well. And before he's done saying the sentence, Jairus' friends are like, your daughter is dead. Your 12-year-old daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any longer? Oh man, what Mark is showing us so much more than just a teacher. He's showing us the author. Both characters in this story are female victims of illness that are ritually unclean, one as a result of death and the other as a result of a hemorrhage. Both are regarded as daughters in the story. An act of touch restores both of them to new life, even as those around don't understand what's going on. And both of these women represent the significance of the number 12 in Jewish tradition. In Jewish tradition, the number 12 was full of divine meaning. It stood for perfection, or look at your neighbor and say, authority. Jesus wasn't just a teacher, he was the author. The number 12 in Hebrew signifies perfect government, God's government, divine order. The author is restoring order to the world that got out of order under Adam's dominion. The second Adam is here, but don't miss this restoration is being accessed by faith. That's actually what this whole chapter is about. Did you catch it? They're freaking out in the storm. Jesus is like, where's your faith? Woman presses through the crowd, gets miraculously healed. Your faith. They bring Jairus the report, your daughter's dead, don't trouble the teacher. Jesus literally turns from here to here and says, don't be afraid, only believe. The only way into this kingdom is faith. Faith is when you believe that no one else can do what he can do. Faith is when you stop taking your impossible situation to man-made solutions meant to save, heal, and deliver you. And you press through the crowd and you bring your thing that no one else could subdue to the only one that can.